Hello and welcome to our fifth video in statistics, and today we're going to be looking at finding averages from grouped tables. But before we do that, I suggest you go and watch our videos on finding averages from just normal tables, so regular tables. And if you're happy with that and you're content, here's your first task. I would like you to use the keyword at the bottom to try and fill in the gaps in this bit of text. So use the keyword at the bottom to try and fill in the gaps in this piece of text. Pause the video, have a go at that, please. Okay, so now let's go through the answers. How many people were surveyed? Find the total frequency. So you work out the total frequency to tell you how many people you asked or how many people in the population or sample. Mode, the biggest frequency shows the modal category or group. Or number if it's just like a shoe size. Range means the range in data, not the range in frequencies. We're looking at the smallest bit of data we collected compared to the biggest bit of data we collected. The median, the piece of data halfway along. If you have n pieces of data, then it's n plus 1 divided by 2 piece of data. The n plus 1 divided by 2 will give you the position of the median. Okay, so hopefully you are able to do this, and the key thing that's going to come in handy for the rest of this lesson is understanding that the total people surveyed. So to find out how many people were in our sample size or in our population, we need to find the total frequency. That's going to be really important in this lesson. The total frequency is how many people are in our sample, in our population, the number of people we surveyed. Okay, so moving on, we need to understand before we can do any calculations with grouped tables, before we can find any averages or anything like that, we need to understand where a grouped table comes from. So here, what I've done is I've got a table and a set of data. Now, usually we'd put the data in order and find averages from it, but for now what we're going to do is we're going to focus on filling in this table using this data. So we're going to fill in this table using this data. Now I'm going to quickly go through the groups that I've created just so you understand what numbers go in where and how you can fill this table in. So the first group is 0 less than the score less than or equal to 20. That means we're going to count everything in terms of the frequency of this first group is going to be any number that is bigger than 0 and less than or equal to 20. So 20 would go in the first one. If you look at the second one, it starts with 20. It's saying bigger than 20 but less than or equal to 40. So we don't want to include 20 in our second category because we're including 20 in our first category and it's equal to 20 in our first category. In our second category, because it's not equal to 20, we want anything bigger than 20. Any score bigger than 20 but less than or equal to 40 goes in our second category, and so on and so forth. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video and fill in this table for me, please. Pause the video and fill in this table. Okay, so if you filled in this table correctly, it should look something like this. It means that there is one person who scored between 0 and 20, 10 people who scored between 20 and 40, 11 people who scored between 40 and 60, and so on and so forth. Now that was pretty straightforward, and now hopefully we understand where this table comes from, where our grouped table comes from. It will come from data that looks similar to this. It would just be data where someone has went, oh, I could find individual things, but my data set would be too long, my table would be too big. So instead I'm just going to group the data together so that we can have a smaller table and it'd be easier to manipulate the data and work with things. Now, if we can go from a set of data or a list of data to a table, surely we can go the other way. So if I give you this table, you can tell me what the data would look like. Pause the video, have a go at that, please. Well, if you would have tried to do this, then you would have noticed that it doesn't work. If we try and make a data set from this data, it doesn't work. We don't actually know what any of the scores are. All we know is that 10 people have a score between 0 and 20. That's all we know. That could mean that 9 people have 1s and one person has 19. It could mean that everyone's got a 6. We have no idea what the data is. So from this data set, we could not tell you what the data looks like. From this table, we could not tell you what the data is. So we cannot find it. So that means if we don't know what the smallest value and the largest value is, it means we can't find the range. because the data is grouped. We have no idea what the smallest value is. The smallest value could be 17. The smallest value could be 1. We have no idea. The biggest value could be 99. The biggest value could be 80. We have no idea. So because of this, from grouped tables, we cannot find the range. Now, you might be asking, well, we can't find the range, sir, but surely we can find the other averages. Well, yes, we can, but we can't find the exact value of those other averages. So from this table, we could probably work out the one that's the most common. We could say, well, most people have got a score between this group. So because we're not finding a individual value, we wouldn't call it the mode. We'd call it the modal group. We'd call it the modal group. We don't know what the exact mode is, but we can find the modal group. So if you look at this data, our modal group would be between 60 and 80 because that is where our highest frequency is. We know that most people have got a score between 60 and 80, and that would be our modal group. We would not call it the mode because we don't know the exact value. Okay, so that being said, we now know that we can't find the range. We know that we can find an estimation for the mode, so we can find a modal group. Well, what about the median? Can we find the median from a grouped table like this? Pause the video. What do you think? Okay, so once again, we can't actually find the exact median, but what we can find is roughly what group the median is in. And later on, as you go through your maths education, you'll probably learn how to find a estimated median. But for now, we're just going to look at where the median is, what group the median is in. And to do that, what we do is we take a cumulative frequency. So for example, we look at the first bit, we have 10 people. Within the first 2 groups, we have 12 people. Within the first 3 groups, we have 17. Within the first 4 groups, we have 30. And within the first 5 groups, so everybody in our, everyone who we taken scores off, there are 40 people. And the 40 people, the median person is going to be the 20th person. And the 20th person is in this group, 60 to 80. The 20th person is in this group, 60 to 80. We can see that. We won't know what the exact median is, but we can say that, well, the medial group is 60 to 80. And that's how we find the median. We use cumulative frequencies to find the group the median is in. Now, there's only one more average left that we haven't looked at. So we know we can't find the range because we don't know what the values are. We know we can't find a estimation of the mode, so a modal group we can find. We've just said we can find a median group, so we can find the group where the median is, the position of the median. We roughly know it's going to be between 60 and 80. And the last one is the mean, and this one is probably the most difficult. So what I'd like you to do is think about how can we find the mean from a grouped table? Because we can do it from a regular table, but can we do it from a grouped table? Pause the video. What do you think? Okay, so the mean being significantly more difficult is because we don't actually know what the exact mean is, and all we can find is an estimated mean. And to do this, as mathematicians, what we do is we need to assume that the data in each of the groups is not very spread out and that it's actually grouped very centrally. That's what we need to make that assumption. We're going to assume that all of the data in the groups are grouped very centrally. There is no big spread and there's not like a different number. We're just going to assume that they're all grouped centrally, and this will help us find an estimation for the mean. Now, if we look at this table and we think, oh, our first group, what is the center point of our first group? Oh, the second group, what is the center point of our second group? Instead of just saying the center point, what is the midpoint of these groups? So that's what we're going to do as mathematicians. What we do is we find the midpoints of each of these groups. And so I've added a column to my table, and it's just the midpoints. Okay, it's just the midpoint. So the midpoint of 0 and 20 is 10. Midpoint of 20 and 40 is 30. Midpoint of 40 and 60 is 50, and so on throughout this. Okay, and once we've got these midpoints, we can kind of ignore the groups because we don't need them anymore. We can just look at it. We can look at the frequencies. We can look at the midpoints and do exactly what we would normally do if we had a regular table. And what we normally would do in our regular table is multiply the frequencies by the midpoint. Well, in our regular table, it wouldn't be a midpoint. It'd just be the value. So we're going to assume the midpoints are the values that we have, like we did in our regular tables. and we're going to multiply it by the frequency. So I'm going to make another table, sorry, another column that looks like this, and it's just the midpoints multiplied by the frequencies. Now, before I can do anything else, I need a couple of bits more of information. The next thing I need is how many people I've surveyed. So that's the total of the frequencies, the total of the frequencies. And then we also need to know what the sum of the midpoint times the frequency is. And that is because if we were going to add all of these values up, so if I was going to add the 10 10s up here, or the 2 30s, or the 5 50s, or the 13 70s that up here, that's what I would get. And if I totaled all of these numbers up, I would get 2,220. And that's important because when we're finding out the mean, we do the total, the sum of the values, divided by the number of values that we have. So the sum of the values divided by the number of values. So we have 40 people surveyed, and the sum of all of the scores is 2220, so 2,220, and I divide it and I get 50.5 as my median. Now, I understand that's difficult to understand and that's a lot of things being thrown at you. So what I've done is just summarized it for you here in a list of key points. And it's really important that you either screen grab this or write this down, because it will be really helpful for when you go through the questions that you're going to practice. So the key point is this: the midpoints give us rough values for each subgroup. Because they're grouped together, we need a rough value so that we can start estimating the mean. That's why we use the midpoints. We need to multiply the midpoints by the frequency to get an estimation of the total of each subgroup. So for example, there are 10 10s, we need to add them all together anyway, so we add them in each subgroup, so we make that next column in our table. And the last thing we need to do is find the sum of the midpoint times the frequency, and that's the estimation of the sum of the total values. That's the estimation if we were going to use a regular table or a list. And the last thing we need to do is divide by the sum of the frequencies, and that will give us our mean. Now, I understand that's difficult, so I would really suggest you go and watch Mr. Amison's video, where he's going to talk you through some more questions of finding means from grouped tables. If you're feeling super confident, then go on Dr. Frost and Corbett Maths and do some practice on there. Go off, be productive, and I'll see you in the next video.